Open our ears and open our hearts so we'll know what trees in our lives we need to eat from and what trees we need to cut down so that we learn how to judge, what to judge, and what not to judge. And we thank you for it in the name of Yahushua. Amen. All right. Hi. Hi. All right, so we're going to start the Torah portion with actually we're going to start it at Bereshit 2, 8, and 9. The Torah portion is Devarim 20, and we're going to look at 18 and 19. And once we've looked at that and understood that, then we're going to go back and consider the beginning of the Torah portion, which is 16, 18, to kind of get a full picture of this. The month of Elul is the 6th month, the last month before the 7th month gets here. It's our last opportunity to take a look at where we are, where we stray off course, what we need to correct before we come fully, before we enter into Yom Kippur. I say Yom Teruah is that last chance to really look at the Word and understand where we are. Yom Kippur is where we examine the changes that we have to make, because what's the next step? We enter into Sukkot. And the 8th day of Sukkot is where we are to be at a point where we can go back to the beginning. Okay? So let's take a look at this. It's Parsha Shoptim. Shoptim means to judge. So as we begin the final length of the journey towards Sukkot, we come to the month of Elul, a time that we have to dedicate our final reflections as to where we are in our relationship with Yahuwah, our Elohim. So in this lesson, we're going to consider Devarim 20, 19, and 20. It tells us about trees. When we lay siege to a city that Elohim has given us, where we can eat some trees, and some trees we chop down. We'll take a look at that in just a second. But what trees do we leave and what trees do we remove? Before we do that, let's take into account these verses at Bereshit 2, 8, and 9. It says, "And Yahuwah Elohim planted a garden eastward in Eden. There he put the man, the Adam, whom he had formed. And out of the ground made Yahuwah Elohim to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life, also in the midst of the garden, at the very center of the garden is the tree of life, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." Now let's take a look at verses 15 through 16 of Bereshit chapter 2. Yahuwah Elohim took the Adam and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. Yahuwah Elohim commanded the Adam, saying, "Of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." Now, we take that literally, and we wonder, well, if he was supposed to have died right then and there, why did he live to be 930 years old? Well, we have other books that give us the answer to that, namely the book of Jubilees, that tell us that the day is 1,000 years. Adam was 930 years old, so he didn't live the entire day. He died the day that he ate of it. Okay? But we'll take a look at that in just a second. With that in mind, let's take a look at Devarim, at Deuteronomy 20, 19 through 20. And we're going to read these topically. And topically, it makes sense. It's good warfare strategy. "When you shall besiege a city a long time, in making war against it to take it, you shall not destroy the trees thereof by wielding an axe against them, for you may eat of them, but you shall not cut them down." So if the tree provides food for you, don't cut it down. Makes good sense. It's not the tree of the field that is besieging you. In other words, the tree of the field is not the man that you have a struggle with. Okay? That's basically what it says topically. "Only the trees of which you know they are not trees for food, them you may destroy and cut down, and you may build bulwarks, siege engines, against the city that makes war with you until it falls." Okay, so we read on the surface, okay, you're going to go and you're going to besiege a city for a long time. Don't kill your food source. And if it doesn't produce fruit or fruit for you to eat or food for you to eat, then use it to build your siege engines. That's what we read. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Having taken everything into account, we can now consider that there's a difference between a tree that provides nourishment and a tree that does not provide nourishment. Okay? An almond is a lot better than an acorn. It's a lot easier to eat. Okay? The Torah portion of Shabbatim tells us about cities of refuge for those who have committed an unintentional transgression, namely the unintentional of another person. These verses can be directly tied in to the cities of refuge and this month of Elul. Now we're getting a little bit off course, but I want to bring this in because it's the whole Torah portion runs together. Okay? During this month, we have a final period of time before reaching Yom Kippur to understand where we are in our relationship with Yahweh Elohim, His Torah, and our relationship to our fellow human beings. There's a lot of things that we're considering during this period of Elul. And we can consider that is, during this period of Elul, could the avenger get a hold of the person who committed an unintentional sin if he entered into a city of refuge? No. Okay? They couldn't go in there and put this person to death. Elul is kind of like a city of refuge for us right now, because it is during this time that we're making that final look at where we are in our relationship before we go to Yom Teruah, where we have to make that final decision. Yes, I'm going to be in a relationship with my Elohim. Yom Kippur, we take that final last look, we humble ourselves and make the choice of what we have to get rid of and what we need to keep. What trees are good for fruit or for food and what trees are not good for food. Because only then can we enter into Sukkot with what is the commandment that we have to keep on Sukkot. What is Sukkot to be? A what kind of festival? A what? A joyful festival. I cannot enter into the gate if I have a whole bunch of junk in the trunk. Okay? So that's why we bring up these cities of refuge. We have a final opportunity to become of where we stray off course from the instruction of our Elohim, and we have a final opportunity to make the necessary course adjustments. We can look at Elul as a type of city of refuge. So with this in mind, let's go back to the trees. Let's consider that the city in these verses represents our existence. Okay? It's the first thing. Everything has a type. The city, in this case, represents us, our lives. Okay? So let's consider the city represents our existence. With this concept, let's consider the phrase, when you shall besiege a city a long time in making war against it to take it. All right, so I don't want to make war against myself, or do I? Okay, part of the thing about Yom Kippur is I'm humbling myself and I'm looking to see what I need to change. Some of the things that I need to change in my life, I don't want to change because I'm comfortable with those things. I'm warring against myself in a sense. Okay, so let's take a look at this. First, we consider the word for besiege in this case, which is tazur, that means to confine. Now let's consider just for a second, this is extra. The word tazur is the root of matzor, which is the root of Matzraim, which is Egypt in our language. Okay? So, to confine, to place into bondage. Okay? So we can consider from this word is an act of separating something from everything else in order to focus entirely on it. So I have to take those things that can lead me into bondage and place them in their own set so that I can examine where I'm at. But I also have to take the things that place me in a good relationship with my Elohim, or even the humankind around me. I also have to confine that in a set because I'm I'm examining everything, right? So it's an act of separating something from everything else in order to focus entirely on it. The word ki means when, but it also means certainly and assuredly. So what we now consider, especially during this time of Elul, is that we are to set our existence apart from everything else in order to take a truthful look at it. Okay? What am I examining right now during this month of Elul? Going into Yom Teruah, where I'm going to make that final choice. Yes, I really do want to be in this relationship. But what am I examining as I go into Yom Kippur, where I'm commanded to humble myself before my Elohim, in that last look at myself before I enter into Sukkot? Okay? So, our inspection is not to be a mere glance. But in this verse it says a long time. It's here that we are able to take the time necessarily to truthfully perceive, discern, understand where we are and what we have to change. Everything about the feasts and festivals, from when we started Passover till we reach Sukkot, is about examining ourselves and figuring out what we need to change. Everything in existence from the time of the Adam through the transgression that became sin, chatat, that led humankind astray, all the way through the patriarchs, through Egypt, through the children of Israel, all the way through Moses to Yahusha. Everything is a preparation for entering in the world, into the world to come. Everything along the way is a set of lessons to teach us what we need to leave behind and what we need to what we need to have in order to move forward into the world to come. Every year we go through a period of feasts and festivals to practice what's occurred over thousands of years. We get to practice it in a 6-month span. It's pretty amazing. Okay? Every year we look at ourselves to find out where we're at. Literally, the words used for a long time are yamim rabim. That means, this should ring a bell, an extended day. Does that jump out at anyone, considering what we just considered? The day that you eat of it, you will die? An extended day. Okay? What we can consider from here is an extension of the day of the Adam, considering Bereshit 2:17 that says, "But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat of it, for in the day that you eat of it you shall surely die." Do I eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil on a regular basis? Do I eat from a tree that is not good for food? Because if I do, I'm going to die of malnutrition. Okay? We know that the Adam died at the age of 930. 70 years short of 1,000, which were told in the book of Jubilees as a full day. He did not survive the full day because he chose to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Why would the fact that he lived only 930 years be something that's important? Why would that be specific? Why would they tell us specifically that Adam lived 930 years in the Torah? If it tells us that a day is 1,000 years, what do you get when you subtract 930 from 1,000? 70, which is a numerical value of which letter? Ayin. Ayin. Ayin, which means what? To perceive, to inspect, to look, to become aware. Ayin is the Hebrew word for eye. So if I have an extended day, then what am I supposed to be doing in the midst of this extended day? Being perceptive, learning, changing, so that I don't commit the transgression that became chatat. Sin is an overrated word. Chatat, that caused the Adam to stray off course to the point that what happened? He's expelled from Eden. And there's only one river that connects to the branch that leads in. There's 4 heads, but only one of them surrounds the land of Havilah where there's gold. Can I find my way back to that one river that surrounds the land of Havilah where there's gold? So what we can consider then is that in the phrase, when you shall besiege a city a long time, that we are being granted an extension of our existence to focus in on it and in truth. We are being granted an extension of our existence to focus in on our existence with truth. We are being granted an extension of our day so that we can focus on our existence truthfully. That is what this month is all about, because I have this last little jot before I get to Yom Kippur where I have to know what I have to change and be willing to change it before it's a coat. I have to be willing to make the changes before the shofar blasts on the last Sukkot of the age of the Adam as the door closes, so that I can enter into the gate and not be left outside. Okay? All right. With this in mind, let's consider the phrase, in making war against it, to take it. So it uses a different word for war in this case. It uses the word hilachem, that also means to use as food, to eat, and to feed upon. In the verse, the word hilachem has a lamed prefix that tells us to war against, but if we consider this prefix to also mean according to, in regards to, and to consider, we can formulate an idea of becoming aware of what we eat or consume spiritually and how it affects our existence. So from the phrase, when you shall besiege a city a long time, in making war against it, we can consider an idea, a complete concept of we are being granted an extension of our existence to focus in on it in truth in order to become aware of what we eat or consume mentally or spiritually and how it affects our existence. So if we consider from this point of view, are there 2 different types of trees that we must be aware of? A tree that's good for fruit, that's good for food, and a tree that's not good for food. There's a tree of life and there's a tree of the knowledge of good and evil. One leaves me in the garden, one expels me from the garden. Okay? All right. This idea is going to be very important as we consider the trees, and the whole concept that we take away from these 2 verses will be very important in this time of reflection during the month of Elul before Yom Kippur. So let's take a look at the balance of verse 19, considering what we've just discovered in the first part. You shall not destroy the trees thereof by wielding an axe against them, for you may eat of them, but you shall not cut them down, for is the tree of the field a man that it should besiege you? Or is the tree of the field a man that you should besiege? Either way, we'll look at that word in just a second. So, during this period of life extension, got to get the brain and the mouth to cooperate. You ever have that problem, David? Okay. We have to become aware of what things bear good fruit and feed us, and then we have to consider if they are in any way if we are in any way struggling against them, being fed by them. Are we struggling against being fed by the things that can actually help us to grow? Are we struggling against the things that feed us and help us to grow? Again, very important concept as we move towards Yom Kippur. Okay? Bear fruit. Okay. We must not cut down the things that feed us good fruit. This then complements verse 20 that says, only the trees of which you know that they are not trees for food, you may destroy and cut down, that you may build bulwarks against the city that makes war with you until it fail. It may not surprise anyone if I tell you that this isn't exactly what the Hebrew says, but we'll look at that in a minute. How do we know that they are not trees for fruit? How do we know that a tree is not something that's going to feed us? The word for war in this verse is milchama. That means to battle against, to destruction. Ironically, the root of this word is lacham, that means to eat. So what we have to know to cut down are those trees that produce the things that are harmful to us when we consume them. Only in cutting these things down can we build up the tools that we need to overcome those areas of our existence that create the obstacles that keep us from moving forward into truth. Let's take another look at that verse right quick, and let's pull out some words. Let's pull out some of the Hebrew words from it. Okay, so of course, only the trees that you know that are not good for food. Well, obviously, I'm not going to eat from something that is not good for food, right? Okay, that you may destroy and cut down. So we have this word destroy that is tahit, that means to corrupt, to cause decay. Interesting that the word for cut down is karat, that means to make a covenant. So if I ask, what trees am I not to eat from? I can consider that trees that corrupt the covenant that I have with my Elohim, I need to avoid. Okay? That you may build bulwarks against that city that makes war with you. Or that in doing so, you avoid against you till you fall. Okay? So we take this whole thing, this word that for build, is bana. It means to restore and to establish. The word for bulwarks, the words for siege engines is matzor, meaning something that puts you back in bondage, that puts you under siege. So what do we take from this idea? What are trees that are not good for food? They are those things that corrupt the covenant and restore our lives to mitzarim. And in this, we fall. We catch that? What is the food that we should eat? We should eat the good fruit that is given to us. The instruction that we eat is what helps us to grow. The fruit that we avoid, or the food that we avoid, or the trees that we avoid, are those trees that corrupt or cause the covenant that we have between ourselves and our Elohim to decay. And then in the process of that, place us back in the bondage of Egypt. And in this, we fail. Everybody with me? Okay. All right, so now we can go on. So these verses thus become the theme of Shabbatim, that means to judge. Okay? From these we can consider the first part of the Torah portion now that begins with Devarim 16:18. We're taking a look at the whole Torah portion. We just did it backwards. Okay? 18 says, judges and officers you shall appoint in all your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, tribe by tribe, that they shall judge the people with righteous judgment. Well, that makes sense. I want to have people that know how to judge and judge correctly. They're to judge. Okay? The knowledge of good and evil is at times helpful, while at other times it poses a hindrance to our ability to see truth, as our perception is often distorted by our bias and subjectivity. I can see it's true. I can be shown that it's true, but I will refuse to believe that it's true. opinion. How do I know that? What kind of tree am I eating? Okay? These limit our ability to, at times, not be truthful to ourselves because as carnal beings, our insight and awareness is limited. Okay? Remember that, because we'll look at this Tuesday. As carnal beings, our insight and our ability is limited. And you'll see this in verses 1, 2, and 3 of Yohanan chapter 3 is where we start to get an idea of this. 1 John. We are all made to contain the ingredient of mitpalel. I've shown you before. If I take the word Adam in Hebrew and I spell out the letters of Adam, if I spell out Aleph, Dalet, and then I drop down the first letters of that, I get Adam again. The letters that I have left over spell mitpalel. Saying, okay, well, what's mitpalel? It sounds like a Mediterranean dish. It's got those little pine nuts that are roasted. Mitpalel is a Hebrew word that means to pray, to communicate, but it also means to judge, to have insight. Within us is the ability to judge, to have insight, to have free will, to choose. We are made in the image and likeness of Elohim. Okay? Not that we look like him, but we have the capacity to act like him. All right? We have the ability to judge and the ability to seek Elohim for guidance. It's our choice as to how we use this gift. Yahuwah gave us the Torah as a standard to measure our judgment for accuracy. Okay? So, it's not a Jewish thing. Torah means instruction. He gave us a book of instructions to understand how to judge things accurately. He gave us something, he gave us the measuring rod, so to speak. Within its pages are the answers to every situation that we encounter throughout our lifetime. In this Torah portion, we're going to explore what it is to use good judgment and what it means to allow our judgment to be distorted. What it is to eat trees that bear fruit, and what it is to not eat trees that are not good for food. We'll also consider the benefits and the consequences of both. We'll consider that everything that we decide is inscribed into our soul, and we'll consider that scientific evidence also proves this to be true. Finally, we're going to consider that it is to be a child in, or what it is to be a child in the house of our Father, Yahweh Elohim. Okay? Again, what it is to be a child in the house of our Father, Yahweh Elohim, is also something we're going to consider Tuesday in 1 Yohanan. Topically, we can consider that every entrance to the camp, there was a judge to render a ruling or a judgment or the equivalent of a police officer to carry out the judgment or to enforce the ruling. There were shoptim and there were shoptrim. We can apply this to ourselves as having eyes, ears, touch, sensation, and a nose. Yahushua used to say, those who have ears to hear, let them hear. If you have the ability to understand, you will understand. I have to be able to shema. I have to be able to perceive, discern before I can understand. It's a continuing theme throughout the Torah. Okay? So, these things serve as judges to the input that we receive into the camp, which is our lives. And an officer that carries out the judgment, our mouths that formulate what we see, hear, touch, and smell in words. These judges must be careful to discern between Lashon Hara, evil speech, and Shmiras Halashon, which is guarded speech. Once I say something, it is said. I can't take back what I say. I can apologize. But even the best crafted apology in the world is still going to leave a glint of hard feelings. Okay? These judges must be careful to discern between Lashon Hara, evil speech, and Shmiras Halashon, guarded speech. This idea is contained in the first word of this verse that also names the Parsha, which is Shoftim, meaning judges. This word on one side means to judge and to give a right ruling, while on the other side it means to be vindictive, condemning, punishing, and discriminating. Did you catch that? My ability to judge